LSU landed a quarterback. No, not that one. Or the other. We'll tell you about it. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And as always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Thank you for helping make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. College football playoff is here. FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. Finally, LSU has landed a quarterback via the transfer portal. It's Landon Clark from Elon. Now, I know everybody is just waiting with bated breath to see what's going to happen with Sam Leavitt, what's going to happen with Husan Longstreet, who visited LSU this weekend. And I'll give you an update coming up in just a bit on those two prospects. But let's start with what we know. And what we know is that LSU finally will have a scholarship quarterback on the roster. Now, a little bit of an asterisk because Emil Picarella is returning. And we've told you that before if you're not familiar. Picarella in his junior season was a top 10 quarterback in his class. As his junior and senior seasons went along, his star rating dropped. He ended up being a 3-star, had some G5 offers, ended up accepting a preferred walk-on at LSU. So Emil Picarella is an interesting prospect because it's not that dissimilar from the guy we're going to talk about here in Landon Clark, because Clark was a guy who actually coming out of high school was a no-star prospect, had no star rating. If you go look at 24/7 or on 3, he didn't have a profile. He didn't have a star rating at all by the services. So he goes to Elon, and Elon is part of the Coastal Athletic Association, and he spends 2 seasons there at Elon. In 2024, his participation was minimal. He in that 2024 season, played in 4 games, so he was able to maintain his redshirt year. He ran the ball 4 times for 11 yards in that season. So again, just a very minimal output in the 2024 season. In 2025, he ends up playing. He did throw 1 pass in 2024, by the way, it was incomplete. So this year in 2025, he ends up starting all 12 games. Starts 12 games for Elon. He throws for 2,300 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 18 picks. He runs for 614 yards, 189 attempts. He also ran for 11 touchdowns. So 18 touchdowns passing, 11 touchdowns rushing. He counted for 29 touchdowns. So you're talking about a guy that's a true dual threat. Doesn't have outstanding size. He's 6 foot, 186 pounds. So not a guy necessarily that fits the mold of a premier style, Power 4 conference quarterback. What is notable, though, is that he committed to LSU among his Final 4. And his Final 4 included Michigan, Kentucky, and James Madison. Now, of course, Billy Napier is now at James Madison. Bryce Underwood is returning to Michigan for a second season. And then Kentucky, as we well know, just signed Kenny Minchey from Notre Dame as a transfer. So all that to say, Landon Clark was looking at these opportunities, the 3 power opportunities, Michigan, Kentucky, LSU, knowing full well that whichever one of those spots he picked, he was going to end up very likely being a backup. He was being recruited to be a backup behind a premier player. The difference today among, I should say, LSU, Kentucky, and Michigan is Michigan's got Underwood, Kentucky's got Minchey, and LSU has Landon Clark. Now, I don't believe that LSU is recruiting Landon Clark to be their starter. They're not bringing him here with the intention of saying, you're our guy. playing 1 year really as a starter in the Coastal Athletic Association is not exactly going to be the thing that inspires a ton of confidence to say that's the guy that's ready to come and take the SEC by storm. And I know the feeling a lot of people have. They're going to look at Trinidad Chambliss. They're going to look at Trinidad Chambliss and say that's what they're looking for. But remember, even Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss, when they recruited Trinidad Chambliss from Ferris State, they didn't bring him to Ole Miss to be their starter. They looked at Chambliss as a guy who, by the way, was going to Temple from Ferris State until Charlie Weiss saw his highlights on Twitter, and they looked him up and ultimately recruited him and signed him. He came to Ole Miss, Chambliss did, to back up Austin Simmons. Austin Simmons was the phenom out of the state of South Florida who sat behind Jackson Dart, who became a first-round pick. And it was supposed to be Austin Simmons' team. And it was Simmons' team until he got hurt, and then Chambliss replaced him, and Chambliss played great and never lost the job. Simmons got Wally pipped, and now Simmons is at Missouri. So, yes, it could transpire that you're looking at a guy with small school experience who's ready to make that leap into the SEC. But I also think it's more realistic to look at someone like Landon Clark in the same way that you would look at any other Division II or Division III or FCS prospect in this case and say, that's a guy that you're bringing in to give you experience depth. I keep making the comparison to the NFL. And when you think about it, the NFL has an elite level starter. Or you would think like each NFL team has a starter, whoever is their franchise starter, someone they drafted or spent a lot of money in free agency. And then they have their backup. And their backup is not necessarily someone that you would consider a franchise. It's a backup quarterback. It's someone who, if something were to happen to the starter, the hope is they can keep the train on the tracks until the starter returns. But if you're relying on your backup, it's probably not going to go well. Like the situations of New England having Drew Bledsoe get hurt and the 6th rounder from Michigan, Tom Brady, stepping in and becoming the greatest quarterback ever, or Brock Purdy being a 7th rounder and winning the job over the former 3rd overall pick in Trey Lance. Like, that's an outlier. That's the exception. That's not the rule. So I'm just trying to say, like, just pump the brakes a little bit on Landon Clark and the comps to Trinidad Chambliss. I will tell you that I texted with an LSU staffer on Sunday night after Landon Clark committed, and I'll read you the text directly. It said, love him, great character, made some tough throws versus Duke. So I think just if you're thinking about like that part, the character, the leader part of that, I think that is, an intriguing component of it. You have a guy that maybe has the right makeup, maybe physically is a bit limited, but has all the moxie that you would want, the leadership skills. But again, a guy that you're bringing in to provide depth and be a backup. And if, giant if, the circumstance arose in 2026 or 2027 where he had an opportunity to compete and he kept developing and had made his way onto the field to play, then maybe you're talking about a Cinderella type scenario like with Trinidad Chambliss. But that's not why LSU is signing Landon Clark. They're signing Landon Clark not to be their starter in 2026. They're signing Landon Clark to back up their starter. Now the question is, who's going to be the starter? We'll update that as we continue. It's Locked On LSU, your team every day. College football playoff is here, and FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day of the playoffs. Because right now, every college football playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. Here's what I love about it. You get to use the profit boost on the bets you already feel good about. So the College Football Playoff National Championship is a week away. It's Indiana against Miami. You got a feeling on it? Well, you can ride with the favorite when you think a team controls the matchup. You can take a shot on the underdog if you think Miami maybe is going to upset the Hoosiers. Or you can build a parlay around the players and moments you think are going to decide the game. Then You apply the profit boost and go after even bigger winnings. And when you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football. FanDuel is the best place to get in on the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day at FanDuel. So everybody's wondering what's going on with Sam Leavitt and with Husan Longstreet. We'll give you an update there in just a quick second. I do want to thank you again for making Locked On LSU your first listen of the day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, you can go check out our new Everydayer Club, which gives you access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On LSU, compatible with Apple, Spotify, all the major podcast apps. And there's an invite to a members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. So tap the link in the show notes if you want to learn more. So thank you for that. So everybody's wondering what's going on with Sam Leavitt, what's going on with Husan Longstreet. So let's start with Sam Leavitt. If you're an everydayer, shout out. Thank you for being here. You know the whole thing as it's unfolded, the very, very, very abbreviated Cliffs Notes. Leavitt was in Baton Rouge last Monday. Visit was going great into Tuesday. Tuesday is when we learned that Washington quarterback Damon Williams was entering the transfer portal, and LSU would be pursuing him. At that point, Leavitt was, by my best information, was ready to commit. He got very upset, left LSU on Wednesday, went to Tennessee, had a multi-day visit at Knoxville. When the Damon Williams thing went up in smoke, as we saw, Lane Kiffin got on a plane, went to Knoxville to meet with Sam Leavitt and his family before he took the trip to Miami. As I understand it, LSU made up a lot of ground. The way I said it then was it was not impossible, but it was certainly improbable. Well, Leavitt made his trip to Miami. He left Miami on Sunday to go home to consider what his decision will be and ultimately what school he will pick. If you ask Miami fans, or I shouldn't say fans, if you ask people close to the Miami program, they're very confident. If you ask people in Tennessee, they're very confident. Talking to folks at LSU, they feel like they put their best foot forward and they're really confident. Well, I don't know that in the history of recruiting there's ever been a bad visit. I say it all the time in high school recruiting. You bring a prospect here, you wine them, you dine them. Well, you can't wine them if they're underage, but you know my point. You bring them to the nice restaurant, you give them the great meal, you treat them like kings, you roll out the red carpet, you show them the trophies, you let them take the pictures in the uniform. You know, you tell them how great they are. You show them game film. They meet the coaches. They tour the facilities. You put their names on the scoreboard. It's like there's never a bad visit, ever. So they always feel good leaving, but you never really know what they're considering. So here is something worth considering just when you look at a timeline. So Monday starts a dead period. So the coaching convention is set to begin on Monday. And so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is a dead period in recruiting. So you won't have coaches visiting prospects or prospects visiting campus for the next 3 days. So and by the way, on Sunday, all the early enrollees, the high school signees that are early enrollees from the December signing period, all showed up on campus and checked in because the spring semester is about to start. So remember, if a player wants to go through spring football, they have to be enrolled for the spring semester. So there is an enrollment deadline, which is in the middle of the month. So it's not imminent, but it would stand to reason that if you're Sam Leavitt, or in this case, Husan Longstreet as well, you need to make a decision because if you're going to go through spring football, you need to enroll in spring classes. Now, we do know Sam Leavitt is not going to participate in spring football because of his Lisfranc injury. But still, he has every intention of being on campus wherever he's going to enroll for the spring so he could be there for mental reps and around and immerse himself in the program. So the information that I got on Sunday is that LSU feels really good about Sam Leavitt. Now, they also feel really good about Husan Longstreet. And if I were to give you one caveat, one twist, one surprising nugget, and if you've made it this far into the episode, thank you. And this is the thing that you're probably going to take away from this. I had multiple sources on Sunday independently express to me that LSU not only wants to sign Sam Leavitt, but they also want to sign Husan Longstreet. They want to sign them both. Now, you can roll your eyes and laugh, and I'll be very honest with you. I'm inside rolling my eyes and laughing. That doesn't make a lick of sense to me. Sam Leavitt didn't leave Arizona State to go be a backup. He left Arizona State to go somewhere to make money, play for a championship, and continue to elevate his game before he goes to the NFL. And as I was told, when Leavitt went into the portal, he looks at his situation as a 2-year commitment wherever he's going. If after 2026, he becomes a top 5, top 10 pick, then he would go. Anything outside of that, he would be returning for 2027. So Leavitt is viewing this as a 2-year proposition, unless it's a blow-up year in 26 and he's a top 5 pick. Husan Longstreet left USC because their incumbent returned and he wanted to go somewhere where he could play. Well, if Longstreet is leaving USC, it's hard for me to imagine that Longstreet is leaving SC to come to LSU to back up Sam Leavitt, who might be a 2-year player. Because in that situation, he's in the exact same situation as he was in at SC. So if you're skeptical of this, I'm with you. Just to be abundantly clear, I'm not telling you it's my point of view. I'm telling you 2 people that I trust implicitly expressed to me on Sunday that LSU's hope and desire and plan here is to sign both Leavitt and Longstreet, in addition to Landon Clark. That would give them 3. And if you're just looking at numbers, that does make sense because it is a rare situation in college football where you would go into a season with 2 quarterbacks. Now, in 2018, LSU was in a little bit of a jam, if you remember that. Joe Burrow enrolled at LSU in June. You had Miles Brennan there as well. Well, during camp, both Justin McMillan and Lowell Narcisse transferred out when Burrow won the job. So you were left with just 2 in 2018. And we learned later that Brennan was injured. And so really you only had Burrow as the only healthy scholarship quarterback. That is a undesirable position to be in. You would like to have more than just 2. But if you get Leavitt or Longstreet, pair that 1 with Clark, you've got 2. If LSU is able to pull off the improbable and get Leavitt and Longstreet in addition to Landon Clark, you'd have 3. So file that away. Again, I want to be so abundantly clear. I am not predicting that. I am not telling you I think that's a probability. I think that is a minuscule probability. I think Miami clearly still needs a starting quarterback. Dylan Raiola, it appears, is going to Oregon. Maybe that's why we learned that Raiola didn't take any visits. He was waiting for Oregon's season to end, so that's where he likely is going to end up to replace Dante Moore. Somebody's got to go be the starting quarterback at Miami. So we'll see how all of this plays out. But LSU's hope, in addition to Landon Clark, is to get both Leavitt and Longwood. I do not think that's realistic. My preference would be Leavitt because of the experience. Longwood, higher upside. But if you're thinking about game 1 against Clemson in Baton Rouge, you're talking about a quarterback making his first ever start. No matter how high his ceiling is, that's an unenviable spot to be in. So as this develops, when we get an answer, of course, we'll be talking about it right here on Locked On LSU. We did get an answer on a couple of other Tigers returning and a few more portal ads. We'll get to that as we wrap up Locked On LSU, your team every day. The new year is here, and it's the perfect time to reset your routine and refresh your space. If you're spending more time at home, you might as well love how it looks and feels. That's why you should turn to Wayfair. It's a one-stop shop for getting your home back on track. From bedding and mattresses to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair makes it easy to start the year fresh. See, Wayfair has everything you need for a full home refresh, all in one place. Whether you're updating your living room, organizing your space, or upgrading your work from home setup, Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find exactly what works for your style and budget. Look, I, in this very room, have used Wayfair for the chair I'm sitting in, the desk I'm sitting at, the rug behind me, if you can see it. It is perfect and ships right to your door. So get organized, refreshed, and back on track this new year for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Well, we finally got the news that we had been waiting on. Braelin Moore is, in fact, returning to LSU for his senior season. Braelin Moore was outstanding for LSU. The Virginia Tech transfer was LSU's starting center here in 2025, and he was LSU's highest-rated player in 2025, offensive lineman, I should say, in 2025. It was a group that didn't exactly set the world on fire. But when you look at the highest rated offensive player on the line, Braelin Moore had a 71.6 by Pro Football Focus, an 81.8 pass blocking grade, a 65.8 run blocking grade, and all season long in the 12 games in which he played, Braelin Moore committed two penalties the entire season. He also proved to be somewhat of an Iron Man. I mean, think about the injury he suffered against Louisiana Tech on the first play. A week later, after that ankle injury, he came back and started to play the entire game against Florida. So Braelin Moore anchoring the center of your offensive line is massive. We did tell you here in previous episodes that it appeared as though that was done. LSU on Sunday announced formally Braelin Moore, Harlem Berry, and Tradez Green. Now, it had previously been reported. We broke the news that Berry was coming back. It had previously been reported as well that Tradez was coming back, something we told you more than a week ago. But as I understand it, these contracts just had to be redlined. So if you're not familiar, that's just the two sides negotiating. Now, the terms of the deal were agreed upon, as I understand, for all of these. It was just there are parts of these contracts now that it's when you talk about like professional football contracts or professional sports contracts, you'll have terms and conditions like you can't water ski or snow ski or mountain climb or ride a motorbike or something like that, or ATVs, because you want to prevent this this athlete from getting injured and doing something that's not related to their sport. So some of that type of language was in these deals. So that's what took a little while. Now, specifically when you look at the offensive line, you got Braelin Moore back at center, and you've got Weston Davis back at right tackle. Now, I know a lot of people are going to roll their eyes, but I'll continue to remind you, Weston Davis, who struggled mightily this year, was a top 50 overall player in the country. And we've had a lot of conversation here about the struggles the offensive line had and how much of that was misevaluation and how much of that was coaching, scheme, player combination of all. So this staff coming in with Eric Wolford as a new offensive line coach, with James Craig assisting him, with Nashawn Goddard as well. We announced over the weekend, broke that news over the weekend, that LSU is bringing Goddard, who's a member of the Saints Super Bowl team in 2009, as another offensive line assistant. You have a new offensive line coaching room to try to elevate their play. So Moore at center, Davis at right tackle. We've told you from the beginning the intention was always to add 3 starters on the offensive line. If you're an everydayer, you've heard me say that since the beginning, well before this portal cycle opened. 2 guards and a tackle. Well, I don't know that they've added a starter yet. William Satterwhite, who has spent the last 2 years backup center at Tennessee, I'm told could very well compete for one of the starting guard spots. I do think Jaquan Sprinkle coming in from NC Central, who's a multi-year starter, could also compete for one of the starting guard jobs. Solomon Thomas was a 5-star a year ago who could very well elevate and compete for one of the starting guard jobs. The left tackle spot is one that's certainly up for grabs and is interesting because over the 3 days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, leading into this weekend, there were elite level tackles that visited LSU. On Thursday, Micah DeBose from Alabama visited LSU. Well, over the weekend, DeBose ultimately committed to Vanderbilt. On Friday, a offensive lineman from Florida State visited LSU. His name was Mario Nash. So Nash, who spent 2 years at Florida State, committed on Tuesday to Mississippi State, still took his visit to LSU anyway on Friday, ultimately did sign with Mississippi State. And then finally, Darren Stray, Darren Stray is a offensive lineman from Kentucky, 6'7", 320, who played there under Eric Wolford, who's now LSU's offensive line coach. Stray is the other tackle that they brought in on a visit. Now, Stray has not yet committed anywhere, so that's one to watch. Could very well be the signee that comes in and competes to be LSU starting left tackle. Two other names worth watching that entered the transfer portal from Ole Miss. One is a guy we've talked about plenty here, which is Winston Watkins. He goes by Winnie Watkins. Winnie Watkins is a 6'2", 185-pound receiver from Ole Miss, and he is a big play waiting to happen. Spent his freshman season at Ole Miss this year, and if you remember leading into the portal cycle, I told you there were 5 players that LSU had kind of, through representation, had verbal agreements with from Ole Miss that were going to follow Lane Kiffin. And they were Chambliss and Lacey and Deuce Alexander and Carniero, the kicker. Well, the 5th was Winnie Watkins. Well, the others, after Ole Miss beat Georgia, delayed entering the portal and ultimately agreed to deals to return. Watkins is the one that didn't. So Watkins goes into the portal on Friday, and then Saturday he flies to Baton Rouge. So spent Sunday in Baton Rouge on a visit. I do believe LSU is the front runner there for Watkins. I would expect he'll be an LSU Tiger. The other is Delano Townsend. Delano Townsend started all 13 games for Ole Miss this season and is an interior offensive lineman. He's a guard. So he hit the transfer portal as well. That very well could be someone to watch who might end up in Baton Rouge as a plug-and-play SEC starter in this offense. So Winnie Watkins, Delano Townsend, a couple of Ole Miss players hitting the portal that could very well be LSU Tigers. Keep an eye on them, as we will, as we move through this portal cycle every single day. So thanks for being here with us as always. Podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day for Locked on LSU. It is your team every day.